Hello again. I have another session from the with the crisis team later today, which I'm looking forward to as I try to get over this sort of anxiety and stress caused by this the police state terror that I suffered on the 19th, and I've covered in a series of videos here. Um, and I'm grateful for their support. An important part also of the process is going through this situation and explaining it, and I hope that it will create the impetus for much needed reforms, because the deficiencies that the research that I and associates have done in the deficiencies in the system of financial regulation and this care system, where this sort of profit motive is leading to this dreadful uh, outcome where children are being sort of sterilized emotionally, um, um, and traded with private equity, almost manufactured into long-term cash generative assets, and it's leading to incentivization to destroy rather than repair families. I emailed Adam Lloyd, Officer Adam Lloyd, 1812 at Northumbria Police yesterday, and I sort of said to him, "Look, you have to face the reality that this pretext of this vandalism of Rachel Hudson's car it's been dismantled, and it has. I mean, in a previous video explained in my interview, the one of his colleagues was trying to stress me into breach of his professional code of conduct, of course, but trying to stress me into a confession, and was alluding to a response that had been received from the family court, where we'd raised concerns about key evidence being falsified, and also statements that were unsigned, that key witnesses claimed to have never seen, and so on. And they shut it down and said they won't comment, close procedures, so on and so forth. So he tried to then bounce me and say, after I was very tired and had been subjected to physical and psychological abuse, tried to bounce me into saying, well, I had some sort of tantrum after that and went and spray painted a car. You know, the premise being that I would have needed to. This was in April. The alleged incidents with the car were in January and February. So the inference would be I would have had to procure a time machine and go back in time to perpetrate these absurd allegations of vandalism on my part. It is real that the police state action in Britain, I'm afraid it's not made up. Farmers have been arrested, disabled, blind people, elderly people, campaigning for against what they saw as horrors in Gaza. Farmers arrested for what they believe to be unfair tax treatment. Um, you can look at George Galloway, for instance. He feels he has to base himself outside the UK after he was terrorised with his wife at Gatwick Airport for speaking out against Ukraine. And I've spoken out against Ukraine, and Ukraine is the next big scandal. Um, uh, and yeah, that I'll come back to that possibly in time. But now let's on the move to the case, and I want to give you some context that leads up until the terrible events of the 3rd of December 2021. We're almost 4 years anniversary of that, and I explained there was an extremely difficult situation at WealthTech, Vertum WealthTech, where this alleged fraud, which the FCA suggests happened over a 9-year period, and actually when I was trying to inform them and the FCA and BDO, I'd sort of broken the business down into three elements. So the Vertum Raymond James, which is where it started, trading name of Raymond James, then into the Sapir period, and then the direct authorization via WealthTech. And I'd sort of explain those different parts of its development. And in terms of the Raymond James, this is only my analysis and conclusions, that I don't believe any misuse of client assets happened there. I don't think. It would have been more difficult because they were using a sort of white labeled Persian platform. I think there may be some issues that Raymond James face over due diligence on the transfer of the assets afterwards. I don't know. That's just something that I think may come up. And then the Sapir period, where I started to develop concerns, and there were a number of issues. There was operationally, it was very unstable. There seemed to be different bits that didn't work that well, although I didn't have day-to-day exposure to that. I was just picking it up from other people. I was just writing research notes and distributing them, so I wasn't involved in the trading and management of client assets. But it was very obvious that John had significant control of front and back office, which is a major red flag. He had these explosive increases in wealth. Could be that it was all through entrepreneurship and so on and so forth. That's certainly would be nice to believe that, but it was starting to lead to a confused picture. It was tough because compliance people were coming in and conducting audits, and colleagues were saying that there was no concerns about misuse of assets. It was more sloppy administration. There was also another warning sign potentially, was that the people who were working in the operation side, John seemed to have massive intellectual and experience advantages over. They didn't seem to be up to the requisite standards, to perform the roles. Well, I'm not suggesting they did anything wrong, but there looked always to be a problem there. But again, compliance and so that were sent from the Sapir side seemed to be waving it through. I was then in this terrible position where I felt client assets are at risk. Nobody would back me. Didn't have confidence in a whistleblowing system. So I was trying to balance, if I potentially move on this, probably not going to get the backing. I'd blow up, put my own family at risk. Continue, then potentially clients are at risk. So it was a massive moral dilemma every single day. So I thought the only way I can do is try to get out, think about it again, and then do something. Not easy to do when you can look jobs in other area, but you've got children who are in schools and they'll unsettle them, and they were in private education. I was pretty much investing everything I had into that. My choice. You could look back and say that possibly stretched ourselves too much for the children, but that's what we wanted to do. Didn't have an extended family, so we wanted them to be well educated and independent, so they wouldn't have to rely on anybody when they were older. And so it was difficult, and then COVID come along and so on. And I've gone through some of the other things that led me to the same conclusion in terms of talks with the company I currently work with, in terms of collaboration and how they didn't come to fruition. And I felt I could see in John, I mean, these are allegations, and I felt I could see the same issues in him and what I was facing, in terms of almost feeling trapped and highly stressed by a situation, but from a different angle. As I said, I did kind of suspect that an asset management business was effectively being run by like a bank, in essence. So money was, not saying banks are run like this, but in concept that the money was, some of the money is being used for alternative purposes. Clients would see what in theory they had on a screen and on a statement, paper statement, and should they need to redeem, then money would be taken from one source or another to make that redemption. And as long as the redemptions were being made, then in theory the show could roll on. And to do that must put an enormous, well, you would think put an enormous strain on someone. It certainly put an enormous strain on me, in terms of kind of suspecting it, not quite ever being able to put myself in a position where I could raise it in a clean way, where I could look after everybody effectively. I feel that there are a lot of people in that situation that ran that business, who are playing a dual game, who were saying everything's okay, can't see anything wrong. That they're also putting themselves out as highly qualified, experienced professionals, whether it be investment or operational or compliance. And there is a certain irony in terms of this case that the FCA, who catastrophically failed themselves, will be relying on these very same people for witness statements. So there's a bizarre thing there where it's hard to believe. I mean, you can say it's a master stroke and there were wonderful lines of code developed to mask it and so on and so forth. But you have to say, an educated person or experienced person, there was enough um, to have evoked concerns, but the problem is nobody wanted to join on and have a coalition and back each other on that. So I was very much on my own. But it's ironic that I suspect those who who formed different conclusions, but whilst also wanting to promote themselves as top professionals, will also be providing witness statements to assist a regulator that also failed. That's one of the bizarre natures of it. So I was eventually able to get myself out, and again, I need to look at it because I thought, well, maybe I've been in this situation, frustrated and disappointed at the way the business has been run and clients have been looked after and so on. Maybe it's prejudiced me in some ways, and so I needed to move, new perspective. Went through this process and then eventually said, well, everyone else thinks it's okay, but the only way I can go now is the regulator. And I didn't know, I always have a lot of confidence in there, but really there's no other alternative than anyone that's got any real power to go there and investigate. And I've told that story. But to leave, it did require quite an adjustment, and I'm not making any blaming anyone for that. I had to sort of cover a drop down in income. Didn't want to disrupt the girls, and I wanted to be able to try and save clients as well, essentially. And that was a difficult situation. Took a very tired, having to 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 do other things to make up the shortfall in income. We hoped that my wife was investing in a photography business which had been hit by COVID, and tried to get that up and running. So we kind of hoped that would get up and running. We'd manage this transition, and we'd be okay without um, harming the girls' education. Um, and that was kind of tricky, and we were having some issues with older daughter. We'd had these for some time, misuse of technology, um, beating a younger sister, and actually in previous, the last time we were all together in Poland in the summer of 21, the grandparents were greatly distressed at older daughter's behaviour, and often when they were playing together, which was with somewhat reluctance from the older daughter's perspective, they would feel the need to stand almost guard on by a door or something like that, just in case, because they were concerned. Wise father in particular was greatly upset by what he was seeing. Um, and yeah, so managing these things, there's quite a lot of abuse of technology, and I was probably a bit um, light on that, because it was being abused, it was being used late into the night, it was being work wasn't being schoolwork wasn't being properly prioritized, and so on and so forth. And occasionally we did take it off her and say, right, that's enough. You're not being reasonable here. And actually, I was a lot lighter than some of my peers on in that, because I'd take it away, and I would say, right, that's it for 2 or 3 days, maybe more. But after a matter of hours, I started to feel a bit guilty and never enjoyed it, and kind of would go back and say, look, I don't want to do this. Don't take any pleasure of it. Can we just find a way where we can trust you, and let's not have to do these things? And it would be okay for a while, and it would lapse back. And you know, um, but unfortunately, there was a lot of bad behaviour towards her younger sister as well. Um, and there was a difficult run of things. I remember the storm Arwen came along, that sort of ripped up a fence, damaged the roof. So a lot of things still haven't fully come out of COVID, so I had to deal with that. And boiler as well failed, unfortunately. So a lot of the stresses, that's what families have to cope. And then that leads us to the darkest day, which I'll cover in the next video, because I want to take people through the mechanics of these cases and how the system is very, very ill and unnecessarily adversarial, and who benefits from that. Take care. Bye.